Secrets from a Coach. Thrive and maximise your potential in the evolving workplace. Your weekly podcast with Debbie Green of Wishfish and Laura Thompson-Staveley of Phenomenal Training.
Debs.
Law, you all right?
Yeah, I am buzzing with this mini-series.
Oh, it's just so cool, isn't it?
I know. And it's just such an opportunity to learn, refresh and disrupt our thinking, which I know is one of your favourite phrases.
Mm-hmm.
And the ambition for this mini-series was to look at practical ways that we can bring pride values to everyday life. Mm-hmm. We've had an amazing selection of guests so far. So we had Steph, who was really talking about what we can do to create a safe environment for someone to be able to drop their armour and be free to be them.
Yeah.
We then heard from the fantastic Ollie, who just gave us like a lesson in language and new ways of looking at things. So rather than it feeling difficult and complicated, we just kind of have those aha moments. Mm-hmm. So it's been great to see some of those Instagram posts coming through of where people are sharing their moments, whether that is their moments where they've created a safe space for someone, moments where they've had like an eye-opening jolt. And I'm really looking forward to see what gets prompted by this week's focus, which is all about celebration of difference.
It is about the celebration of difference. This is with the wonderful Sophie, who we have had on our podcast before, actually. And I just thought bringing her back, or I should give her a proper name of Sophie Catherine Bennett. But she is somebody who is such an advocate and a professional in what she does of working in her current role, but also working across vulnerable communities and people that sit within it. And just listening to her around her, not just her resilience as to how, you know, people have just assumed or judged her. And it's also that self-acceptance, which she talks a lot about in this podcast for us, and that ability to still be your authentic self and making sure that you have that opportunity to just be you. And in particular, I particularly like the fact she talked about, for her growing up, she was just accepted for who she was. But as she said, and as we discussed, you know, not everybody is in that privileged position to just be accepted as who you are, regardless in the, you know, how you present yourself. So I thought it was really fascinating to listen to her talk about that fierce compassion. So shall we take a listen and see what she has to say? Hello, everyone, and welcome again to a very exciting guest, which if some of you have listened to our podcast over the years, Sophie, I should call her, but Soph was on it a while back talking about her experience. But what we wanted to do for this month of Pride, as you know, we're exploring different perspectives and different things and how people deal with what gets thrown at them from identifying as part of the queer community. And Soph is going to sort of share it from her perspective, as well as all of the work that she does as, you know, as an ally and an advocate, a big advocate of what this means, both in her professional work and in her personal life. And in particular, how over her career has she been supporting the more vulnerable communities. So Soph, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. We're so happy to have you back. What I wanted to start off with, obviously, give us a little bit of your personal journey and how, I suppose, your identity has shaped your outlook on life and work. Tell us more, Soph.
Such a good question. Such a good question. I think from a young age, I knew that I felt differently about my sexuality specifically, and kind of felt like, you know, other girls might say, oh, she's such a pretty person. And I'm like, yeah, I fancy her a bit. And they were like, oh, that's not what we meant. And I thought, oh, okay. And then you kind of realise that actually I'm thinking about this in a slightly different way than maybe you are. And I thought, okay, something's a bit different. Something's changing. I've been really lucky, I think, in that my mum has always been very open about sexuality. It's never been something for her that's been kind of taboo or something that's been negative or perceived in a negative way. My godfather is a gay man. So, you know, I never thought it was anything wrong with that, you know, initially in the beginning. And my mum, having worked in aviation, that's not unusual to be involved with people that are part of the queer community. So it never felt to me like it was something strange until you kind of get older and get exposed to other people who kind of are quite happy to share that with you. Quite often quite happy to say that that's wrong, which is really interesting. And so yeah, I've certainly experienced that. I've certainly experienced, you know, like a level of bullying that I think a lot of queer kids have experienced, especially in kind of secondary school. But I never kind of saw myself in a victim in that way, because I've always been really confident in who I am.
Yeah.
And I've always felt really strongly about who I am, and I'm fine with it. I'm great with it. It's just part of who I am. It's just another piece of Sophie. So it kind of never upset me in that way, right? But I saw how it upset some of my friends, some of my other queer friends.
Okay.
Gosh, that, you know, they think really differently about this. Someone else's perception of them really impacts them in a
Right.
way that I don't necessarily experience. And kind of seeing that vulnerability for me was really interesting. And I always worked, as you know, I was at the youth wing. I did a lot of volunteering there.
Yes.
And there were a lot of kids that were part of the queer community, or felt like they might be part of the queer community, but they were different about their sexuality or their general presentation or their gender fluidity, all of these things. And it seemed like we were able to create this really safe place for them to want to have that discussion.
Yeah.
So from a very young age, I'd say, people were talking to me about that, because I was very open about who I was.
Yeah.
Felt like they could have that conversation with me, which was great. It's a massive blessing in lots of ways. And so I did have those kind of conversations with some of my peers and some of my friends from a really young age. And I thought, wow, our life experience is different, is fundamentally different to that of a person that is straight. And even more different if you identify as a different gender.
Yes.
So I thought, right, okay, that's interesting. And I have loads of trans friends, and one really comes to mind at the moment. And I thought, wow, his life is really hard. You know, like, his life is really different. His experience is completely different. And the way that he views life through his lens is so different to mine.
Right.
Of that aspect.
Okay. And what are those differences, Soph? Just to give us a bit more, you know, flavour around that.
Kind of view life. So fundamentally it's different. So right, you and I go around as cis women. I'm pretty happy to be a woman. I don't mind it. You know, I'm great with that. But I think if you wake up every day feeling like this is the wrong body for me,
right,
it's very hard to move through life comfortably.
Yeah.
And that's hard. And you know, it's like little things that we take for granted, like non-binary people, for example, going to work. Which bathroom are they going to use?
Yes.
That's still really, really difficult. And that's like a really simple thing that you and I take for granted, really. Going to the bathroom can be a challenge. And even when you go into a bathroom, you can be challenged in that bathroom. Like, why are you here? Why are you in this bathroom? And that happens quite a lot. And I think it's the anxiety and the fear of like, what if that happens to me? And that, you know, some of my friends that I knew and some of the young people that I work with, talk about a bit more later, would avoid that situation entirely. You know, would go to work, or would, you know, try and work specific hours so that if they needed the toilet, they could do that at home. And it's like such a small thing as a bathroom that you and I wouldn't think about.
Just take for granted, right?
Is the forefront of someone's mind. Yeah. Not just a tiny thing that's a good example, but there's so many things.
Right.
There's so many things.
And that's really hard. And I know, so you did a huge amount of work at the youth wing and working with those young people. And I suppose when you go back to that time and you listen to what they had to say, was there things there that you went, wow, they have not got the support of a family? Like you said, your mum, and obviously I was with Carl, the supportive family around to go, and, you know, but those young people that didn't have that, how did you help them navigate that?
Gosh, I'm sure I was such a small part of it, but I think it's just saying there's nothing wrong with you. You know, I think that's a huge moment to give someone, or to support them in giving themselves permission to be who they are authentically.
Yeah.
Because I know that that's not something they can control. That's not something that, you know, you don't wake up and be, you know, want to be gay.
Yeah.
It's just who you are. It's just how you identify. It's just part of who you are. And so I think a huge part of it was that kind of authenticity and that permission, that important permission to be who they are.
Yeah.
Try and live unapologetically. But it's quite hard, you know, in one space to have that and to feel that way, and then to go home and to not have that space to be who you are.
And that must be really, really tough mental, from their mind health and everything. It must be really hard to be able to differentiate. And I suppose the support, that is there enough support out there now? Because we've moved on. It was a long time since you were at the youth wing, and I know we'll talk about the work you've done since then, obviously with the vulnerable communities, but is there more that could be done in those setups, those environments, to bring awareness to this?
Yeah, I think there's always more that we can do. There's always more as a community and as a society that we can do for any community that's a minority. Absolutely, specifically, obviously, for the purpose of this podcast, queer people, and especially young people, because ultimately they're our future, and they need to know that they're safe and secure.
Yeah.
Right. And so, places like youth wings are amazing. Then I would love to see more funding for LGBT specific youth clubs. There's a lot in Brighton that goes on, like All Sorts, for example, are a brilliant charity, and they do a lot of great work, and they create that really safe place. And you'd assume that being in Brighton that it is safe, but it's, it is one of the safer places to be. But there's still, of course, stuff that goes on there that's really not great. But All Sorts is a great charity, and they do a lot of good work, as I said, about creating that safe place and about being around people that are like you. I think that's also really important. And like representation is massive. If you don't see yourself represented in something, it's really hard to think, oh, I'm okay, that's okay for me to be like. If you don't see that, I love seeing, like, it's so silly, but like an advert on TV for something of like Mrs. and Mrs. or little things like that, and you think, yay, that like pockets of joy are so massive to like a queer child that's sitting at home with parents telling them they're wrong. So all these things, and there's that level of intentionality about that. It's not hard to make things more inclusive, and that's why it's quite scary, at the moment with the Supreme Court rulings and stuff about EDI. It's quite terrifying, not just for the queer community, but specifically for like non-binary and trans communities. It's so hard and it's so scary. So I think more needs to be done in this country for that specific community within the LGBT plus community. That's something I would love to see. And I don't necessarily know that I have all the answers, but I know that's what
something. Going from there. So tell me, Soph, then, what does pride mean to you personally, and how do you think that meaning has evolved over the years? I was talking earlier to one of our other guests, and we were saying around the word queer, and back in the day that was derogatory, whereas now it's becoming that's accepted. So I mean, there are other things that have evolved over time, but for you, it would be really nice to know what pride means to you personally.
Sure. Well, I think it's great that we're using the word queer. I think a lot of people that I know have like reclaimed that word. It's like a recognition of like, this is, previously been used in a negative way, and actually we see it really powerfully, and that we accept that now. I think pride to like me is like self-acceptance, equality, inclusion, authenticity, permission to be who I am and to be proud of who I am. And that level of resilience, I think there is a resilience that comes with that, because it's not always easy, right? And I've had some really difficult situations because of my identity, and it's like I can't control that. That's not. I don't do this on purpose. It's just who I am, and I think. And then it comes the last thing I really love is the celebration. It's wonderful to be in a room of people that are celebrating who you are and accepting you for who you are. That's really important to me. Is that I feel like I've learned in life is I'm me. There's only me, and I've only ever been me. I've only ever been me. So how should you love me? To be when you're with yourself, and that's so hard to do. But that's really important to me, and so that's what I would love other queer people to be able
to be as well. And do you think how have you seen it evolve? I know you just mentioned the Supreme Court is like taking it 20 freaking steps backwards, right? But when you think about how that whole community has evolved over time, what's your take on that, and what have you seen that's been different?
I've seen some really positive things, actually. In some great moments of acceptance of, there's a lot of people that I know that are super accepting, and even in my own prejudgment, people that I've thought, oh gosh, that's a bit scary, and they've been like, oh yeah, we love that, that's great, we love gay people, and you're like, oh fantastic, okay, that was unexpected. And I do see that a lot, and I do feel that generally society are really supportive in a lot of ways, but there are, unfortunately, as with everything, some people that just massively disagree, and I think there's this whole thing about feminism, right? And that you can't be a feminist and support trans women. But in my opinion, you're not a feminist if you don't just support trans women, because trans women, or like 1% of the population, how we're using them as a scapegoat for all of the other problems in the world is like, but that's what's happening. And unfortunately, they're choosing a really vulnerable minority to do that to. And that's that's what I'm currently seeing as a kind of really big shift and a big change.
Right.
I feel like trans people specifically, but non-binary people as well, are being scapegoated for some of the larger issues. You know, it's not a trans person's fault that you can't afford to buy food for your family. It's not a trans person's fault that there's a housing crisis. You know, that's got nothing to do with that 1%.
Yeah.
They already have a very challenging time
Yeah.
existing in the world.
Yeah, which is tough, isn't it?
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that I've seen that I think is a quite aggressive, violent change within the community.
And I suppose that sort of feeds into some of the things you're on your Instagram. I mean, it reflects your strong advocacy for the LGBTQ plus community and as you said, the social justice issues that are going on around us today. But when you're putting things out there, because I obviously follow you and I go, wow, I didn't know that, or I had no idea. And so learning from you, but how do you choose what to speak up about and why? And, what is it about that particular thing that you go, no, I'm going to share this, put this out there? What goes on for you, Soph?
I think part of it's like a gut feeling, like when you you read something and you think, that resonates with me. I don't always know why, but I think, okay, that's really hit me. That's really impacted me. That to me is beautiful. And then I want to learn more about that. And I want to know that I know what's going on. Right. And so a lot of it is like research, is kind of understanding what's going on. And I would hate to put misinformation out there or disinformation out there. That would be really bad. So it's about, seeing something that I think that resonates with me. That's important. Let's do a bit of research on that. Is that accurate? The information that I've seen accurate? What else can I share about it? And then I just can't try and put it out there and just
and how do people respond? Because obviously I don't see all the comments you might get back on it, but what's the sort of the mix of comments that you get back because you've spoken up or put it out there, but you're not misinformation? I always know from you, whatever you put out will be as thoroughly researched and right, in inverted commas, as it can be. But what sort of responses do you get?
Generally pretty good.
Right, good.
Obviously my following is predominantly queer anyway, so like a lot of my friends are all part of the community themselves anyway, so it's unlikely that I'll get negative, but that's not to say I haven't in the past. Certainly have, people have kind of gone, oh, I don't agree with that, whatever, and I'm like, well, you can't disagree with facts. Do you know what I mean? If that is what it's saying, like, you can't say that that's not true. Just because you don't agree with something doesn't mean it's wrong. And it's like, I really want people to have the space to feel like they can have discussions, because that's important. Because ultimately, if we don't have discussions, if we don't open it up, we're not going to learn from that. And people that are otherwise shut off, you're not going to have a positive conversation. So that's kind of what I want, whilst recognizing that it's not a queer person doesn't have to do that. You know what I mean? But me too, in the position that I'm in. But sometimes it's been kind of, we're not reaching a positive solution here, and it's like I'm really happy to have those exploratory conversations and to do that until I feel like it's aggressive or like you're just here for an argument. You're not here to learn something, and we don't need that.
We definitely don't need that. And I think, Sophie, you've hit the nail on the head, because the people I've spoken to so far, and Laura's also spoken to, I've interviewed some other people as part of this Pride pod that we're doing, and that's the one thing that I've noticed has come through, that ability to even want to learn and to be curious, to understand, and because I don't know everything. I learn from you, as you know, and I go, I did not know that. And it's that ability. I think that's the thing that I've noticed, is people's willingness to have an open mind and to just research, learn more. And then they may still make a judgment, they may not, but that having that awareness and that level of, I suppose, understanding can make a huge difference. And I know you mentioned around, the work, obviously Brighton was a big place that you worked at, and you actually did a lot with those vulnerable communities down there, with the housing and the homelessness and everything that was going on there. But if you think about how that plays out for you, what did you notice that was different, or was it not different compared to when you were working with the queer community? Because everybody gets impacted by homelessness at some point, right? And it doesn't mean who you are. But what did you notice when you were in that world? Because it was, the stories you used to share with us sometimes, it just blew my mind, and it was really hard to get my head around that. But when you think about the intersections, as you say, between queer rights, housing, homelessness, and the work, where do you think more work needs to be done?
Certainly with queer kids,
right?
homeless, there's a huge homelessness crisis in this country anyway, right?
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
It's a massive, massive issue. As you know, I feel very strongly about homelessness. Like, it's
You
something
do.
I fundamentally disagree with. A lot more that we as a community can do, we as a society should do, and what the government should do as well. So there's like, it's a three-pronged approach. It's massive. The problem is huge, and there's a lot of ways that we're failing these people, because ultimately the person, in my opinion, the person you see on the street is a family member. That's someone's mum, that's someone's sister, that's someone's sibling.
Yeah.
Important, and we've lost that a little bit. But I mean, what I found out working in the homeless community in Brighton and Hove specifically is that LGBT plus young children are massively disproportionately affected by homelessness.
Right.
People are surprised to hear that, because you're in Brighton, you're in the gay capital, but actually there's still a huge issue there, because people come out to their parents and their parents say, not my child.
Right.
Homeless.
Wow.
In that applications come in. So I was part of the young person supported accommodation panel, and we'd get referred cases directly from city councils and that sort of thing. And a lot of it, it had to be listed as a vulnerability, because that's how it was affecting people. Sexuality was a huge issue in their kind of home life. So yeah, as I said, LGBT plus young people were disproportionately affected by homelessness, community, especially trans children. So, we were having pretty young trans people coming into our accommodations, having no contact with family or no support from family. And
wow.
in a way, we're lucky, because we are in a very openly queer place. So that was great. And obviously, I'm very open about being queer myself. So, engaging with young people, that was easily done. And it was, I was obviously very intentional with posters and everything. There was like a whole section that had, information about how to be an ally and all these things. So I think it felt like a safe place, hopefully, for those young people straight away. But what we also saw was young people that were questioning. I don't think they were questioning. It was just safer to say that they were questioning.
Got you.
Rather than saying, no, I am actually trans, and that's how I identify. So we would see that as well. So we'd see not only young people that were questioning coming into the hostels, but that number increasing of trans people that we have increasing steadily over time, because there was a feeling of safety that they could be the person that they were in their community. So I'd see a steady kind of increase of LGBT plus young people living with us over time. So I think people often assume that that's not the case, but actually it's a huge part.
And it's really interesting. You're saying the community, the Brighton community, absolutely, it's a great gay capital. Yet you would think the acceptance would be different. But obviously, maybe I'm being naive, but I just think it's not accepted somewhere, anywhere, sometimes, even though you do come to a safe space. Like, people come to London because they think, it's a great place to be. And it's sometimes the worst place you could be as well. And it's how do people who can find support and help, where can they even start to look for that support, especially if they're, as their families have just gone, not my problem, out you go, and put you out on the streets? Where can people find support or help?
It's so hard. And I think you can find some really good stuff in your area. And there is stuff that's really good that's community led. So there's often like community based projects that are working that are really, really good. And that, I don't know, chess club for gays on a Tuesday. That was something that we like referred people to on a
brilliant. Yeah.
Fantastic. So it's like little things like that. Then all sorts, like I mentioned earlier, they do a lot of great work as well. But there's like gendered intelligence, there's mermaids, there's lots of really great places that you can go to access help. And then sometimes just by connecting, they can then say, actually, we're doing something over here, or oh, we're just doing this.
Right.
And that's really good. And like Not a Phase, for example, is another really, really good charity that I've done a very minimal amount of work with. And they're fantastic. And so there is a lot out there that you can access, but you've got to know where to look. And if you're not in a safe place, that's hard to find.
Yeah.
You've just got to do a little bit of research.
Yeah.
There are things out there, but so much more needs to be done. I think I'd love to see a community kind of led project that's done in community centres all across, all of the boroughs. That would be fantastic. And just to have like one LGBT night or something like that.
Yeah.
To create that safety, to create that space that young people specifically can go to and from to feel like part of their own community and not feel like so alone.
Yeah.
It would be so impactful.
That's really, yeah. And I suppose it's that belonging. We like, we all want to belong, and if we feel that we're not, it is a very lonely place to be. And I suppose for you, I suppose asking you, have you faced any challenges in the workplace that around identity, and how have you navigated them?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think a lot of people, unfortunately, like when I've said historically that I'm married, not in my like current role, but people kind of don't give my relationship the same legitimacy that they would a straight relationship.
Okay, tell us more.
And things like, oh, like that response, but if I was a straight woman and I said me and my husband are going out, they'd be like, oh yeah, that's fine. It's not questioned.
Yeah,
But if I've said before, yeah, my spouse and I are going out, they're like, what?
yeah. What do you mean?
What do I mean?
Yeah,
What do you think? And like, it's important to me to be open and to be who I am and to be very confident in saying that, because not a lot of us can be, or it's not always historically been safe to do that. So I'm very comfortable in doing that. And I want to be that person to say, yeah, I'm in a different relationship to yours kind of thing. And people sometimes it doesn't matter. And that's the ideal reaction. But sometimes people don't love it. And they're quite happy to say, like, what do you mean? That doesn't, it's shocking. That's shocking.
Yeah. What? Yeah.
And I was like, what do you mean it's shocking to you? It's the same as your relationship. It's just slightly different,
Just slightly different, yeah. And I just want to pick up on that part, because I know before we came on and started chatting, I said, how do you want me to, refer to your spouse? And I said, is it wife? And you said, no, it's spouse. So help people understand the difference as to what it is for them to be your spouse.
Okay, so I'm married to someone that is non-binary, which sometimes for some people falls under the trans umbrella. And yeah, so my spouse, they use pronouns they, them, and for them it's much more comfortable to be referred to as spouse. So that's what we do. So I'm happy, like personally, to be wife or spouse or partner, like whatever. It doesn't really impact me. But I think for someone that's non-binary, that's obviously really significant, and the pronouns are really important.
Yeah.
So yes, it's me and my spouse.
Yeah. Okay. Because I know everybody, as you said, look and go, yeah, and it's like they don't know what to say, how to say it, and as you said, it's just getting people understanding that there is differences everywhere. But find out, ask, be curious, get questions. Yeah, because I know. Obviously, before we talked about your cancer diagnosis with BRCA gene, and I know you had some crazy experiences in that field at the time with you and your spouse. So. And when you think about now, when you reflect back on that, because how long ago was that now? 3, 4 years? 5 years? Oh my goodness, 5 years ago. Wow.
I know.
And when you reflect back on that and you think, how has it changed? First of all, what was your experience? Because it just was art, really. And then do you think it's changing in that area when, people rock up with their spouse?
I don't know.
Yeah.
You've heard this story before, but we're in the room with a surgeon and we're talking about my surgery. So I had a bilateral double mastectomy with implant-based reconstruction. And just thinking back on it, like, is this real life?
Yeah. Did this happen? Yeah,
it's real. So I went into this room with my spouse and we were sitting down waiting to see a surgeon, and he comes in and he's talking about my surgery and he's going, yeah, so you're going to look quite different when you've had the surgery. And I said, yeah, it's like quite a big surgery. I have thought about that. And he said, yeah, well, you're not going to look kind of similar. And I said, what are you trying to say? Just kind of tell me what you kind of trying to say. And he said, well, your nipples, you're not going to have them anymore, and that's going to look really different. And I don't know how men are going to feel about that. So when you are looking to kind of, get a husband, you're not gonna, that might be hard for you. And I was like, whoa, so many things are wrong with that situation. And I was like, you've got a lanyard on, you've got like one of the NHS rainbow lanyards on, you've got all the gear and no idea. Like I was like, I cannot believe this. And I was like, you're sitting there with my spouse that I've introduced you to, the person I'm married to and obviously want to stay with. That's like an example of like my relationship not being legitimate in comparison to a straight presenting relationship, because I'm pretty sure if I was with my husband, that wouldn't have even come up.
True.
But anyway, and I was like, wow, so you obviously don't think that this is a legitimate relationship. You're obviously stepping like a man's feelings over my feelings, which is really interesting. And that plays a lot into like, there's a lot of things that are said to like gay women, specifically bisexual women, pansexual women, you know, like you've just not found the right penis yet, which is genuinely something.
Is that what gets said?
Yeah, like, you've just not had, and even like specific people being like, you've just not had my penis yet. That's
Whoa.
what someone said to me, and I was like, what do you mean? That is insane. So anyway,
That is mad. Okay, wow.
So, but back to this doctor. So like another, because that like was quite triggering, because I was like, I've heard this in a different way in different situations before. I don't respect that. And then, yeah, that was like a just complete lack of respect and understanding that of what is going on. And it was so interesting to have my body centered around, you know, such a huge, significant thing that was happening to me about body image and about changing. To have that centered around a man's feelings was really, really challenging for me to hear.
Wow.
And I think in that moment, I kind of took a minute and I thought, what's gone on there? And, you know, Kate next to me was like, oh, how do you feel about that?
Yeah.
Not great. But I said there and then, I was like, that's unacceptable. The way you listen to me is unacceptable. I don't want you to see me again. And I certainly don't want you looking at my body again.
Yeah.
And the nurse, there was a nurse in the room too, kind of like chaperoning, and she was like,
yeah, literally.
Looking. And I was like, do you think that's acceptable? Because you haven't said anything. You're sitting there gawping, and I agree with you, but you haven't said anything.
Right. Okay.
And that's like that phrase, silence is violence, you know, it's so true. Like,
yeah.
Said something there in that moment and been supportive and been an ally, because you're also wearing the, you know,
rainbow lanyards,
but you're not doing anything.
Yeah, and actually that silence is violence thing, I think that's such a powerful statement, right, Soph? Because how often, and you must see this in your current role, right? How often do you see that approach being taken?
So much,
right?
And I think I don't always, you know, like blame the person that's not saying anything, because sometimes they don't know what to say.
Yeah, sure.
I'm scared of confrontation, and some people don't know what to do, and I get that, you know. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to be on the warpath to talk about stuff, because that's not everyone's prerogative, and that's fair enough. But I think if you see injustice unfolding in front of you and you don't say something about it, but you feel strongly, then I that's what I have an issue with. I think that if you see something that's unjust and you see something happening in front of you that is unacceptable, you know, I would encourage anybody to stand up and to have a voice and to say something, because we are each other's support.
Yeah.
We have to be.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, part of the queer community is very supportive like that. You know, if I spoke to one of my queer friends in that way, I would say something about it, you know. To be rude. It's not like I'm gonna stand up and be like, oh, you've been awful, you know, that's not about. It's like this phrase, I'm not calling you out, I'm calling you in. I'm trying to bring you into this conversation about why what you've said is wrong. It's like an educational piece, right? And some people don't want to hear that, and fine, you don't have to hear that right now, but even just to challenge someone is good enough at that moment, because they'll think about that again.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose that links into, we never know what that impact that's going to have, right, on people. Like, obviously that experience you had with, you know, with that surgeon was appalling, and that could have really impacted you. It did. I'm not saying it didn't, but it did. But for somebody who isn't as self-aware and unapologetically themselves and very confident in who they are, super resilient and different things, that would have had a massive impact on them. And I know some of the work that you were doing around the person-centered trauma-informed care, that must have come up time and time again. And how does that play out in your work life now?
Wow. So I think it's really important to me to be person-centered and to be trauma-informed. That's like the golden thread through everything that I do.
Yeah.
Whether that be, you know, my current role, my personal life, engaging with friends and family, like, you have to be person-centered. And that's the very crux of like trauma-informed support, right?
Absolutely.
It's about that person. It's about understanding that there's some level of trauma, I think, really realistically in everyone, but, you know, like with the person in front of you. So if you're looking and if you're speaking to someone that's vulnerable, that's dealt with homelessness, that's possibly a prison leaver, that's also queer on top of that, that's going to add that extra layer of complexity. You know, especially if, for example, like if we're talking about a Black trans woman, her experience of life is going to be so significantly different to everybody else's, and like it's fundamentally unsafe. I mean, the last time I checked, the statistic is that a Black trans woman will live until she's 30 years old, because she will either take her life before then or be killed by someone she knows before then.
Wow.
By her partner. I don't know if that has changed, so I mean, that's something I probably want to research again, but
sure.
That's scary.
Wow, that's horrific.
We're talking about human lives here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like awful. I can't comprehend that, you know.
Yeah.
And so when you're having conversations with people that are significantly vulnerable, you have to be trauma informed and you have to be person centered, because you're not going to get firstly the information to support that person, but they're not going to want to open up to somebody that doesn't really care, right?
Yeah, or doesn't even understand
Well,
the words that are coming out of their mouth, the impact they're having, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's important to me in every single job I've had, is to have that approach, and I'm lucky because I've got really significant training in that, so I do understand that really fully, and I try to embody that in everything I do. And certainly in my current role, I'm still around people that are really vulnerable, that do really struggle, and a lot of that is due to historic trauma that manifests in a different way.
Yeah.
It manifests when you get a bit older. So if you've got like some level of adverse childhood experience, let's say, it's often that is then reflected later on in life in some social behavior, or some level of prison experience, because the coping mechanisms aren't there. And that's significant, and that I see a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm with you. It should always be about the individual, right? However they present to you, it's they are human. Underneath whatever you might think, they are still a person that has a heart that beats, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's so important to lead with compassion and empathy.
Mm.
To do that, and you have to be open to that as well. And don't get me wrong, like in the days where I've worked with homeless people, there's some like objectively terrible people that I've worked with, if you want to that, people that have done really, really terrible things and have behaved in a way that is just entirely unacceptable. But at the time, it was my job to work with that person, because ultimately I don't want that person to go out into the world and to cause that problem again.
Yeah, got you.
To see some level of compassion and empathy for them as a person, kind of almost regardless, but also totally regarding the thing that they've done.
Yeah.
To say, I see you in your fullest, I see you and from what you've done, and I think that you have the best version of yourself inside you somewhere. We just need to get to it, because I don't think you want to be bad.
Yeah, exactly.
And
in inverted commas. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
there's so much
and focus on that.
A lot of power in vulnerability, but there's a lot of power in having that conversation. And just,
and it's not being afraid to have that conversation, is it? With just to say, I have no idea, help me understand, even what's going on for you, and I don't walk in your shoes, so I need to have empathy to even aim to understand what's going on, with that ability to be curious and non-judgmental, I suppose. And as I say, just treat people as a human being. But it's interesting. So if I want to go back to what you said, your family, your mum, brilliant, and everything. So who inspired you growing up or today to live, I suppose, your authenticity? No, what am I looking? Authenticity. Yeah. Authentically you. That's the word I'm looking for. An advocate so fiercely.
Wow. I don't know. That's a really difficult question, but it's a really nice one. I think, do you know what? It's good. It's so funny. I'm going to say this, Carl.
Oh, okay.
Well, no, because Carl, as you know, kind of like me, we've always just been who we are.
Yes.
And we can't help that. I think we've just fostered that for each other. And we literally had this conversation the other night, didn't we? About
we did.
Authenticity and about being who you are and then finding your people. And Carl is my people, is my person, one of my people. And I think we've always just been who we are, and we've always had that experience, and it's never changed. So he was a massive part of my life, and still is, obviously. But growing up, it was me and Carl, and we were who we were, and that was fine. It was never anything that was wrong or was a problem, because it was us. And so, and I love how Carl looks at the world and sees the world often in a different perspective than I have, because he, I suppose, like you, like me, wants everyone else to live their authentic life. So you feel very safe and supported in that environment with him. And so, he was a huge part of that. It's completely fine. My mum, on the other hand, is also very much who she is. What you see is what you get. And I love her. I think that's really powerful. And she kind of made me feel like that was okay for me to feel like that, despite her not being gay. I thought, well, she says she is who she is, and she's absolutely, I would describe her as unapologetic, as you know.
Definitely.
I think that's great. And so, like, okay, she's like that, so I'm going to be like that. I've never not had that. So I'm really lucky, because I have had that in my life.
Yeah, you've had good role models as well.
Exactly. And then kind of when you see that representation on TV and you see people and you think, okay, they're who they are and they're really strong about it. And, you know, there's a lot of people that I follow on Instagram and on social media that are, you know, completely unapologetically who they are.
Mm.
I love that. And I intentionally follow people like that, obviously, because I'm like, that's what I want to see. You know, I don't
Yeah.
want to see stuff that's going to make me feel bad about who I am. So I'm not
Yeah.
going to follow those accounts. I'm going to follow people that are unapologetic, that are part of the queer community, that are spreading awareness, that are doing that social justice bit
Yeah.
to me. So,
Yeah.
you know, and I've got amazing queer friends. You know, I've got really, really special, amazing queer people in my life that inspire me every day.
Yeah, and I love that. And I suppose, yeah, if we think about what advice you would give for anybody listening in who might have, you know, who might be of a younger generation or might have their own children, and they think, wow, I've never even considered any of this. What advice would you give to a younger queer people who want to make a difference in their communities or public service? What advice would you give them?
Do it.
Just do it. I love it.
Do it. Like, if you have an idea that you think is good, then it's probably good, right? It's worth sharing, and then just do something about it.
Nice.
That with someone, get on it. Go for it.
Get on it. Yeah, don't stop.
Yeah, don't stop. Why should you? If you think it's a good idea, then why isn't it?
Yeah.
Go take it to someone. If you've got connections with someone, try and see if they're interested. Build that traction. Build that up. What you can do with it.
Yeah.
Something so small, right? You know, such a tiny thing actually is huge to somebody else. So you never know the impact that you might truly have on someone, even if it's small and insignificant. It's probably not.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, isn't it? And that ability to know that you can, because you can, and have that belief, which you obviously had instilled in you from a young age, to go, yeah, you can do whatever you want to do, and you can be whoever you want to be, and just be you. And I think that's so powerful. And I'm conscious that not everybody has that growing up. But as we are sort of celebrating Pride Month, what are you celebrating this Pride Month?
I think, in line with what I spoke about earlier about the Supreme Court stuff, I'm really wanting to highlight and celebrate our trans family and our non-binary families. I think it's really, really important. I'm really excited to go to Trans Pride this year with my spouse, and really feel that spirit together with other people. But yeah, I think we really need to spotlight and hold in really high regard our trans siblings and our non-binary siblings, because they need it so much right now. It takes people that are not in that community to stand up for them now. We really need to be the fullest allies, and be that force for change for them and with them, you know, like hand in hand, and do that, and do whatever we can to uplift that specific part of our community. They really need it most right now.
Yeah, I think so. And as you said, it doesn't matter. It's the support. They're human beings. You know, at the end of the day, why would you not care?
Yeah.
Hey, not all of us are function that way, right? Which is cool. So one last question, I suppose I would love to ask you, Sophie, because as always, you have such a wide breadth and depth of knowledge. And I know I learn from you when we have conversations. But is there a moment, big or small, that made you feel especially proud to be who you are?
Oh my word. I feel like, I think there is one that really sticks in my mind about this conversation that I was having with a young person. So I'm at work with a young person. They're really struggling. We know that there's been a lot of risk related to them, and it's like really significant risk, and we're really worried. And I'm thinking, okay, we need to have a breakthrough at some point. We need to know what's going on with this young person. This is important for like their life moving forward. So we're just sitting down, we're just talking, and then I'm like, right, enough of this shit. Do you know what I mean? Let's strip it back to what's important. Let's just be real. Let's just have a real, genuine conversation. We're humans. We're flawed. What is going on with you? You know, and I said, this is a bit about me. This is the stuff I've experienced in my life. You know, this is who I am. This is my authentic self. And I think that moment of vulnerability and real kind of raw conversation then allowed for them to open up. And say, yeah, this is what I'm experiencing. And I was like, okay, breakthrough. Big moment. And that
now you can do something with that, right?
Exactly. And I was like, there is so much we can now do, because I know I have possession of the information that means I can help you, and I want to help you, and you are worth helping. So let's do that. And those kind of amazing conversations that I've been able to have with young people, but that specific young person, I was like, wow, I feel really proud of that, because I think what got us there was being open about our sexuality and having that shared experience, that shared understanding. And there is this like kinship that comes from that. You do feel like, oh yeah, we're a little bit more connected because you're part of my community.
Yeah, got you.
Because you're part of me and I'm part of you in a lot of ways. And so that enabled us, that went further than me being a professional and then being a young person. It was just like a moment of, we're just people, we're connecting on a deeper level about something. So this is genuine.
Yeah.
And I think that felt in that moment felt really powerful. And then we were able to do some really great stuff after that. So that's the moment that I feel like it was really big.
Yeah, that it sounds like it. I got goosebumps as you were saying that, because having the confidence to even go, cut out the bullshit, let's just call it as it is, what is going on, and get under the surface, just enabled that person, because you shared, to go, it's safe to do that. And I think that's what's really admirable about having the kahunas to even have that conversation. Sometimes it, you know, it makes such a difference. As you said, you never know who you're going to impact on, right? And who needs to hear it when they need to hear it.
100%.
So to finish us off, so we always have a call to action on our pod. So if there was a call to action from you, what would you give us as a call to action?
Wow, such a nice question, by the way.
Thanks.
Yeah, go on. I think it's about the celebration of difference.
Yeah, nice.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
So I'd say we need to celebrate our differences, but we need to protect our community.
Nice.
Like truly protect our community.
Oh, I love. Wow. That is, I think we should put that on another tattoo for you. And I'm sure Laura will say I should have that as well. Yeah. But I think, you know, all jokes aside, that is so simple, but really, really powerful, right?
Yeah.
And it's not hard, is it?
No, it's not.
No, but we make it hard, don't we, in life? Yeah. Well, Soph, I want to just say, how do people, obviously we've mentioned you're on Instagram, but how else, how can they find you? Because obviously the work you do just doesn't sit in a, 40-minute chat with you and me. I mean, you do loads of, other work around that. Where can people find you?
I mean, Instagram is probably the best place, to be honest.
Okay.
So I'd say Instagram is probably the best place. I'm more kind of like active on there than I am anywhere else.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm in the street. If you want to have a chat, I'm happy to.
Yeah.
I mean, if you recognise my large Elton John glasses, then I'm happy to. But yeah.
Oh, I love that. And how do they find you on Instagram? Because I can never remember your little whatever it is.
Fia Bennett. Bennett's got like 5 T's, just to confuse everyone.
Okay, so say that out again.
Fia Bennett.
Fia Bennett. FIABENNETTTTT. Yeah, not as many as that.
Yeah.
I love that. So, I mean, as always, it's a pleasure, and it was a no-brainer for us to get you to speak about this, because as I know, I've had personal experience of the way that you do advocate and you do share, and I've learned a huge amount from you that I had very little awareness of. And I just want to say, thank you for sharing and not being afraid to. So to spend time chatting to us as well. And I hope, I really appreciate that from you, Soph. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
Yeah.
Love this podcast. So I'm happy to even be
cool. And we'll see you on another one, I'm sure.
Hopefully.
Thanks, Soph. Have a good one.
Bye.
So, Laura, what did you think?
I feel really inspired by listening to Soph. And actually, I think my listening to just how fiercely passionate and empathetic, what you said just before we started listening to her, it provides almost an opportunity to have a bit of a mirror moment of thinking, actually, where have there been some scenarios where maybe I've missed, whether it was intentional or accidentally, opportunities to be an ally and to sort of do the right thing in that moment. So I found that, really just that the protectiveness as well as the empathy, that's just what came out. That I just thought, it's about doing the right thing.
Yeah. And it's really simple, isn't it? It's just that, do the right thing. And I love that when she quoted that lanyards are not enough. And I just thought, how right is that? Just because you wear a lanyard doesn't make any difference.
Oh, but Debs, that story she shared is horrifying.
Yes.
I had to listen to it again, actually. I couldn't believe that in this day and age, there was, in a professional environment, there was that level of closed-mindedness and fixed perception as to what it means to be in a relationship. I couldn't believe that happened. I can't imagine what that felt like in the moment.
Oh, I can't imagine how it must have felt, but I really thank her for sharing that, because that was so personal and very real. So, her ability to show her own vulnerability to us, I think, was just, very privileged to have heard that. So, but I think that sort of leads into my sort of, call to action, share the secret around your ally moment. When have you found your person? I'll use Soph's words there. When have you found your person? So what we'd love you to do is, if you share with us your moment, your picture or quote or a memory or a story about your ally moment where you found your person. And we'd love you to put that on our Instagram or post it up there, which is @secretsfromacoach, all one word, just to say what types of experiences you've had as the listeners out there as well. That's what we would love you to do.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think inspired a little bit by that story, because it just really stuck with me. My call to action would be, if someone in your friendship or colleague network has the type of role where they're interacting with people in a vulnerable moment. So maybe they're a service, they deal with service users, or a frontline position, or where you're dealing with people who need your help. And like Sophie was in that moment with a white coat, and she needed help. And just that impact that can have. I mean, that's the story that just sits and, would have had some sort of knock-on effect with it. And and again, it's just a bit of an opportunity to learn and refresh. And maybe there are some scripts and the questions that you've asked that 20 years ago might have flown, and then now it just doesn't fly quite so easily. And do you want to keep knowingly excluding someone and downplaying someone's experience in that moment? And or do you not? Do you want to open your mind up and then look at some ways to do it differently? So my call to action would be, if you know someone who's got a type of role where they are handling people in quite sensitive moments, what are some things that just get, a couple of stories that we can stick in our minds and mean we're a little bit more mindful. So thanks, Sophie, that was really inspiring.
Yeah, it was. Always loved talking to Soph. And I think that's, for me, it was about just the awareness of how do we protect the community, and help and support and, understand and enable people to be their authentic self. So, I hope your week is very authentic as well, Laura, and you have a good one.
Absolutely. Plastered up to the nines in makeup. I mean, the amount of products that go into me looking natural, Debs.
Oh, I would never have known, honestly, Laura. Seriously, you're shining bright there. I love that.
Filter.
Well, filter or not, have a great week, won't you?
I'm looking forward to our fourth and final guest that we've got in a week's time. And then we're going to do our bonus 5th episode where we wrap it all up. All in the spirit of what can we learn, and also Pride just isn't for June. It's like a dog's just not for Christmas. Pride isn't just for June. What are some things that we can take so we bring on some positive momentum and progress? So thanks again to Soph. So Debs, love you lots. Have a fab week.
You too, Laura. Love you lots. Bye.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at contact@secretsfromacoach.com or follow us on Insta or Facebook. If you're a Spotify listener, give us a rating, as it's easier for people to find us. And if you want to know more, visit our website, www.secretsfromacoach.com, and sign up for our newsletter. Here to cheer you on and help you thrive in the ever-changing world of work.